Welcome to the Revolution Church podcast.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Revolution Gathering. Glad you're here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. So, got a lot of content to cover today. We're going to be talking about Dr. King's speech beyond Vietnam, and we're going to look at it like it was scripture. And I think a lot of Dr. King's writings are worthy of that. To be honest with you, it's really powerful stuff that helps guide us in a better direction in life, and really gives us the abilities to show us how to love those who are victims of misinformation that we often call enemies. But I wanted to, I had some feedback, and it wasn't a lot, but I always want to make sure that, if I hear feedback from someone, I'm sure there's other people thinking that. So I just want to cover that really quick. I want to make it clear that I am not against one particular group. I might be hard on Democrats and liberals, but like I've said before, that's been my party my whole life. So when I'm disappointed in that party, it's because it's a party that was always close to me. I do believe we have to get beyond a two-party system, and we're going to have to work really hard to do that, because I just don't think it's giving us any really a clear. I mean, we have clear choices, but not big choices, and we're going to cover that a little bit today. But if you do think I'm against people, I just want to say you've either misunderstood me or I've communicated poorly, which could be likely. It's always easy to misread people, especially when you don't know each other, face to face, and you don't always have conversations. But I want to let you know I'm for life. I'm for reunion. It is misinformation and misguided tactics that I'm against, that I think leads us to backwards thinking and keeps us in a vicious cycle of us versus them. And I want to expose that. I want to, when I look at racists and when I look at people who support war and things like that, for me, I want to know why. I want to get to the depth of it and understand it and have a conversation and come up with suggestions about, hey, this isn't the answer, and this is why I believe this is the answer. What do you think? I remember in high school, because I hung out a lot of punk rockers in the 9th grade, there were skinheads, but some of the skinheads were Nazi skinheads, and I would sometimes sit down. I'd go over to their lunch table, which was kind of intimidating. Here I was in 9th grade. I don't even know why I did this, but I would say, why do you guys think this way? What is it? What are the reasons behind your prejudice? And, it was really always awful, contradictory answers and a lot of misinformation. And, a lot of these kids were just lonely, left out loners who a group took advantage of that. But I have this conversation, and I remember even back then, people being like, what were you doing at that table? I was like, I was just trying to figure out why these guys, who seem like, punk rock people would be racist. I just wanted to talk to them. So I've always been kind of a troublemaker, but always someone who's kind of wanted to communicate with people and know why they think the way they do. Especially if I disagree with it, interestingly enough. But anyway. But my critiques are really here to help. I hope they're helpful. I'm not here to hurt anybody. I'm not here to tell you who to vote for or how to think. I hope it helps us reflect on the choices we make. And we're asking ourselves when we hear these critiques, okay, what is he critiquing? Is what he critiquing leading me forward or backwards? Is it leading me to inclusion or division? Is it leading to peace or unrest? Those are why I ask these questions. This is why I push these things. I'm not here to be Mr. Negative, but I also live in the real world. I live in a world where I suffer from depression, where I struggle to pay my bills as well, and where I see my taxes going towards wars and harming innocent people. I see a divided world, and I can't just sit and say, well, that's the way it is. That's just not how I was raised. I was never, my mama didn't raise a son, and my daddy didn't raise a son who would sit and say, well, the world's a bad place. I guess we just have to accept that. They always made me think that I had to make a stand and be part of a change and make that difficult decision. And I think we all should do that. I didn't think that years later it would run into a conflict with my own father, but I have told him before, I'm like, you raised me this way. So, thanks. But let's look today. I'm really excited about anytime we go over anything with Martin Luther King. I am going to have to leave out a lot of parts of this speech. So I recommend probably going online and looking for it. It's called Beyond Vietnam. I'll tell you where it was delivered at the delivered at the Riverside Church in New York, the 4th of April, 1967. So to give you an idea of where the world was then, and kind of like look that maybe we're in a similar place where the world is now. So as you know, King is one of my heroes, and his words are timeless. And I lean on King because I think he and people like John Hume and Gandhi and Bayard Rustin and so many folks from the civil rights movement and a lot of great religious teachers and non-religious people, even Malcolm X, I inspire to. These folks wrote the best roadmap to how we deal with conflict resolution. Also, I'm always working in philosophy the best I can, and psychology as well. But this is what a lot of people don't know is Martin Luther King Jr. was quite silent on Vietnam for a couple years, and he didn't speak about it. And he was convicted, but he wasn't sure that it would get in the way of the civil rights movement. It would take the focus off of his work of being a civil rights leader. And he discusses that a bit here. The stories that I've read and heard are that one day when he just said he could not be silent anymore. And I find this really interesting because it's the type of thing that I think we all go through on a regular basis. I think he was on an airplane and opened up a Time magazine, and there's that famous picture of those kids in Vietnam running down the street who've been napalmed. And he felt at that time that his silence had become betrayal to those folks and that he had to speak up. And not everybody feels that way, and he'll cover why that is, so we'll look at that. But that was a moment for him where he said, I can't be silent anymore. I must speak up. And I want to say, if we think our voices aren't being heard, often it gets discouraging. I was really encouraged with those folks who were chanting at Kamala Harris's presidential rally for running for president, and people yelled back, and she was not very kind to them. And people spoke out all over online, on the internet. I did. People were adding her Instagram. Not that she's probably reading her Instagram, but I think her advisors probably are. And so when this happened the following night, she spoke out. Unfortunately, we're sending millions and millions of dollars of weapons today. So she said that her and President Biden were for peace, but the actions aren't lining up with the words. This is not me taking a political stand. This is me just basing my theory, my ideas and my thoughts on the facts of what's going on. And so, but she moved the needle. The discussion's there. She said genocide. That's a big movement forward. So that's a reason to encourage us to continue to use our voices. And so every day if you're on social media and you're seeing these things, or you're online, or you even see news, you see these pictures of these children who are covered in blood, people losing their family members, hearing people saying that they've buried every single member of their family. They're all gone. Every day, no food, everything's bombed, everything's gone. They have nothing. And we have to be the call. Someone has to call out for this madness to stop. And, if the leaders won't listen, if the leaders will not lead us in the direction we need to go, then the people and the followers must become leaders. So this is not just reading Beyond Vietnam, but today is a call to conscience. What is your conscience saying? What are you doing? What are you thinking? Are you able to just sit and watch these unfold? Also, after the unfortunate murder of all those young children in the United Kingdom, you've seen unrest in England and a lot of racism coming. I saw a video of a man spitting on a bus driver, telling him to go home and telling him he was a Muslim monster and all this kind of stuff. I'm not so much familiar with England's political system and what's going on there, but I know that a lot of people have stood up against this racial injustice and this racism and saying we're not going to deal with it, and fighting back. Now, what I want to say here is that I think when we continue to see so much mass violence against other people, that this violence begets violence. The fact is that there's wars going on in Kenya, and there's wars, the Sudan war, all these things, and these are wars that you have to go online and look up because nobody's talking about. There's wars and violence going all over the world. And so it becomes easier for us to retaliate through violence and through misinformation and through anger, rather than a peaceful process. And this is what King wants to talk to us about, is how do we stand up to these injustices? How do we speak out when it's not popular? How do we stand firm on our convictions? I'm not saying that the war is causing the violence in the UK, but I have to say there's got to be some things, related. Anger, violence, constant, the way we turn. And how do we change this? And I think one way is through conversations. And I also think other ways is through protests. I don't want to act like an expert on these things because I'm not an expert, but I do my best to at the work that I do and where this work is taking me. The work of loving people and showing grace and letting people know they are accepted has always been my passion, but this is now the passion of saying we've got to make sure everybody gets that message. So here we are, a call to conscience. I'm not going to start right at the beginning or the introduction. I'm just going to start off with things that I highlighted and I felt were important enough to highlight, and hope that you will go and find this whole speech, Beyond Vietnam. It's recorded. You can hear it online at places. It's wild. Dr. King has always recorded his talks and his speeches. I actually have quite a few records that have his speeches on them. All right, well, let's go. Martin Luther King, Beyond Vietnam. A time comes when silence is betrayal. The time has come for us in relation to Vietnam. And as we say, it was a picture in a magazine that spurred this up to him, that said, I can't be silent anymore. And so when we see we're inundated with these violence pictures and these pictures, don't click on this, warning, and we see these violent moments, hopefully we do not grow numb to them. Hopefully it allows something to spark within us and to speak up, and not just in America, but all over the world. The truth of these words is beyond a doubt, but the mission to which they call us is a most difficult one. Even when pressed by the demands of inner truth, men and women do not easily assume the task of opposing their government's policies, especially in a time of war. This is about Nam, but I think it leads us in the right direction when it comes to Israel and Palestine as well. Nor does the human spirit move without great difficulty against all the apathy and conformist thoughts within one's own bosom and surrounding world. And one of the things, you think about, and I think about often, is one of the reasons all the apathy and conformist thoughts that go on in this world is because we're also all fighting for our lives. We're sending billions of dollars to all these different wars in our country, yet most of us can't get one job that pays the bills. We can't afford our rent. We have insurance that doesn't really cover us unless we pay $500 co-pays to get to see a doctor. Some of us are skipping meals. A lot of Americans are skipping meals so they can pay their rent and feed their children. This is happening all over the country. That's why this is time to wake. It might not be a you problem, but it's our problem. And I hope this will shake some of us to continue to speak out and be proud. I had a conversation with someone yesterday who was so worried about speaking out because they didn't want to hurt Kamala Harris's chances. And we were having this conversation. I was very open to listening to what they had to say, but it boiled down to the fact is that people are still dying. This is a candidate who's part of the administration what this is happening with. So when else are we going to get these chances to speak loudly and say, hey, the old concept of if we don't commit genocide, someone else will, is not really a platform we want to have, not a world I want to live in. Nor does the human spirit move without great difficulty against all apathy of conformity through and within one's own bosom and in the surrounding world. Moreover, when the issue at hand seems as perplexing as they often do in the case of dreadful conflict, we are always on the verge of being mesmerized by uncertainty. But we must move on. We must move on from uncertainty. Some feedback sometimes I get is that, often because they say I'm too hard on my progressive brothers and sisters, my liberal brothers and sisters, my Democrat brothers. The reason that is I've been a liberal my whole life. I've been a Democrat my whole life. I might be moving more left than that and thinking that the whole system needs to be changed and we need more than a two-party system because I feel like the system is broken. But it's because I've always cared about those people and always been a part of that people. And so I feel more inclined to critique those that I am a part of. Does that mean I support Donald Trump or that's no? I honestly, like, if you want to know my honest opinion about that, I think someone like Donald Trump is bizarre. I don't understand why he wants to be president. He confuses me. I understand the conservatives, but if I was a conservative, I would be heartbroken that was my choice. He doesn't seem to represent what the Republicans that I knew when I was growing up did. Seems to be a lot of compromising, and his vice presidential running mate J.D. Vance doesn't seem like he's someone fit to lead either. So I think we have a bad situation. What I'm afraid of is that the party that I grew up supporting is taking advantage and doing things because we're so afraid of the other option, and they're going like, what are you going to do? You're going to trade. You're just going to go into from the pan to the fire, or from the fire into the frying pan. That's the kind of the idea is there's no good decision, and I think we have to say, well, there is, and we have to speak up. We have to say no more of this. Not an easy road to toll. This is not, but like I said, it's easy for us to be apathetic. It's easiest for not to speak up. And I know that we have conservatives here, and I know we have Democrats here, but I just want to say, like, I'm an equal opportunist when it comes to critiquing these folks. I'm sorry if I focused more on one group and you think I haven't focused on another group, but I think everybody online has done a pretty good job of focusing on the other group, and that's why I speak out this way. A lot of my progressive brothers and sisters and friends, I hear the things they say, and they just hammer away at the Republican Party, and in some ways rightfully so. I just don't feel like I need to add any more to it, and I often just expect people to understand, yeah, of course I'm not racist, of course I'm against that type of thinking, of course we don't want a dictatorship, but I'm also trying to stay informed and make sure that I'm not speaking out of line either when I critique the other side, because I'm not as familiar with them as I am with my Democrat brothers and sisters. I'm sorry, I'm defending myself, but I just want to make it clear in case it's not clear for those who've sent me some feedback recently. We are on the verge of being mesmerized by uncertainty, but we must move on. Some of us have already begun to break the silence of the night and have found the calling upon to speak is often a vocation of agony. And I will state this clearly, it is a vocation of agony. I have watched our support go down, which was already low. I have more people who are telling me they're concerned. I've become less relevant. My voice often becomes less relevant the more I speak out about these things and talk about these things. And I get pushback. And I question myself at night. I go through this and I I do these things. So it can be a vocation of agony. It can be costly to speak out on these things. It can be tough. And there's a lot of emotions in it. I had a disagreement with a colleague yesterday, and I finally said, I sent him a direct message. I said, listen, I've got to step back from this for a little bit. Can we talk later this evening? I said, because I feel that my anger and my emotions are getting the best of me, and I really don't want to react out of that. And I said, we've been friends for a long time. I respect you and care about you, and I just don't want to say anything. And he was like, totally, man. I totally respect that. Thank you for saying something. We'll talk about this later. And we did. We did, and we came to a conclusion. Because sometimes you just have to step back, because it can be very emotional, and you can start to feel the pain, and you can start to feel the frustration, and you want to be careful that we're not taking this out on each other, that our conversations, that we do disagree well, I won't even say argue well, that we do disagree well, or that we are able to just have conversations without disagreeing and arguing too, that is an option. Some of us who have already begun to break out of the silence of the night have found that the calling to speak is often a vocation of agony. But we must speak. We must speak with all the humility that is appropriate to our limited vision. But we must speak. And we must rejoice as well, for surely this is the first time in a nation's history that the significant number of its religious leaders have chosen to move beyond the prophesying of smooth patriotism to high ground of firm dissent based upon the mandate and conscious of the reading of history. There needs to be a new way that is beyond darkness that seems so close around us. Dr. King, I'm going to skip something and go here. Reverend King says here, over the past 2 years, I have moved to break the betrayal of my own silence. And I underline that because I really like that idea is that, sometimes we're silent because we don't know if it's the right thing to say or the right thing to do, but I think there does become a time where we have to speak out when we see this type of horror happening every day. When we realize that it's our tax dollars that are going to building bombs that are destroying human lives, that we're supporting really the end of a people. Over the past years, I have moved to break the betrayal of my own silence and to speak from the burning of my own heart. I have called for a radical departure from the destruction of Vietnam. I'm going to skip a little bit more. This is where people have questioned Dr. King. Dr. King, why are you joining the voices of dissent? Peace and civil rights don't mix, they say. Imagine that. Imagine that concept. Peace and civil rights don't mix. Peace and civil rights don't mix, they say. Aren't you hurting the cause of your people? They ask. And when I hear them, though I often understand the source of their concern, I'm nevertheless greatly saddened, for such a question means that they inquirers have not really known me or my commitment or my calling. When I read this, I was just moved by it, because I feel the same way sometimes. I feel some people are like, aren't you, getting off your base, stay in your lane, this type of thing, This job is not free from critique, and rightfully so. It should be critiqued. People should ask questions. I answer to a few people that I really go to, but I also answer to you, this community. This community revolution is you. It's not me. It's all of us together. And but there are times where you question and you go, oh, it's tough because maybe I haven't done my job communicating this work well enough for people to realize that this is part of the work, is speaking out when it's not popular, is standing up to injustice, and having that little seed, that little mustard seed of faith in order to move a mountain. And I'm grateful that I was raised in a way to be able to think that way. I hope it's not magical thinking, but it may be. As I said before, like there's a lot we have to skip just for time's sake. We're already halfway through our time together, and maybe we'll have to make this a little bit longer. Dr. King writes here, it seemed as if there was a real promise of hope for the poor, both black and white, through the poverty program. And the reason I highlighted that is because one of the things that Dr. King was doing was he didn't just do civil rights for people of color, but he did civil rights because he wanted to see white people live life better too, and not be victims of misinformation and victims of hate and racism. And he's talking about, like, you know, poor people, you know, we should work together. And he talks about that here a little bit. I just wanted to mention that because I've been reading this book by Reverend Barber called White Poverty, and it's really a powerful book. I recommend it. I'm about halfway through it, but so far it's so powerful. Reverend King goes on to say, what about Vietnam? They asked if our own nation wasn't using massive doses of violence to solve its problems, to bring about the change it wanted. Their questions hit home. I know that I could never again raise my voice against the violence of the oppressed in the ghettos without having first spoken clearly to the great purveyors of violence in the world today, my own government. You hear that? I'm going to read it again. They asked if our own nation wasn't using massive doses of violence to solve its problems, to bring about the change it wanted, their question hit home. And I knew that I could never again raise my voice against the violence of the oppressed in the ghettos without having first spoken clearly to the great purveyor of violence in this world today, my own government. So when we do social justice work, when we speak on the behalf of the oppressed, when we speak on behalf of groups that are having their rights taken away and things like that, we don't use violence for that. When we speak against violence, say don't use violence. You know, love each other, have hard conversations. Let's work this out. Let's find a peace process that involves all of us, everyone. Yet we ignore the violence of our own nation. We become hypocrites. It becomes a double standard. And I often see so many double standards. I'm sure I have them too. We all have contradictions in our lives. That we see or we don't see, that we can confront and that we can't confront. You know, life is complicated that way. But the fact is how can I say, don't use violence here while supporting a government that says it's okay to use violence? Dr. King was giving up quite a bit because he was sitting with presidents. He was sitting with politicians. He had to work with politicians to make these changes happen. And by speaking out against his party, about this party that was working with him, these presidents and these government officials who were working with him, he was hurting his own work by speaking out against violence. But he realized, I can't live. This is a contradiction with I cannot accept. And if it hurts my cause, if it hurts my violence, it's the only thing that makes sense for me to do is to make these sacrifices in order to speak out and speak loudly and clearly. For the sake of the hundreds and thousands trembling under our violence, I cannot be silent. For those who ask the question, aren't you a civil rights leader, and thereby mean to exclude me from this moment and this movement for peace? I have this further answer. In 1957, when a group formed of Southern Christian Leadership Conference, we chose our motto, to save the soul of America. We were convinced that we could not limit our vision to certain rights for black people, but instead affirmed the conviction that Americans would never be free or saved from itself until the descendants of its slaves were loosened completely from the shackles they still wear. In a way, we're agreeing with Langston Hughes, the black bard of Harlem, who had written earlier, "Oh yes, I say it plain, America never was America to me, and yet I swear this oath, America will be." Now it should be incandescently clear that no one who has concern for the integrity of life of America today can ignore the presence of war. If American souls become totally poisoned, part of the autopsy must read Vietnam. Part of the autopsy must read Israel and Palestine. It can never be saved so long as it destroys the deeper hopes of men and women all over the world. So it is that those of us who are yet determined that America will be are led down the path of protest and dissent, working for the health of our land. And I cannot forget the Nobel Peace Prize. It was also a commission to work harder than I had ever worked before for the brotherhood of man. This is a calling that takes me beyond national alliance. We talk a lot about nationalism. Fear of Christian nationalism, and we talk a lot about these Christian nationalists. And I see churches. We're going to meet together, and we're going to all denounce Christian nationalism. We're going to get together, and I see so many of my colleagues speaking about Christian nationalism. But at the same time, we're not speaking loudly enough about the horrors that are happening all over the world. When we often talk about this political race, we're saying, we're just going to have to trade, we don't want to just trade one genocidal guy for another genocidal person. So do we just keep the genocides that we have? Those are the hard questions, and those are the questions I don't like. I don't like to be faced with an impossible question, one that makes really very little sense to me. And often when I see people who get irritated and worried about my words and why I'm talking truth to my Democratic brothers and sisters so much, who I love dearly, but I still want to, that's why I speak the truth. I often hear what about this, or what about us, or what about this? And it's always you're anti-nationalism, but what you're supporting is nationalism. You're saying, we've got to be more taken care of. We have to be taken care of. Even if we're going to kill, even if our leaders are killing these people, at least these leaders will take better care of us while we're committing genocide than the other leaders. That becomes the argument, the lesser of two evils. Unfortunately, with the lesser of two evils, you're still left with evil. But even if I were not present, I would yet have to live with, but even if it were not present, the Nobel Peace Prize, I would yet have to live with the meaning of my commitment to the ministry of Jesus Christ. Folks, this is, for me, once again, is where it comes from. Is we want to show people a different type of Christianity, or as Brian McLaren said, a new kind of Christianity, which is really, I feel like, an original type of Christianity. If we really want to follow Christ and do that, then this is the way to do it. I don't think fighting each other and making fun of each other and mocking each other and using and them one another is the way ahead. It doesn't build a greater community. We should be, that's why I always say disagree well or argue, things like that, have conversations. Because we want to create a greater community, a better movement, a bigger revolution that is willing to stand up to this stuff. So when we stand up for the truth and we say we hold our own accountable, think of the message that sends to others who are not holding theirs accountable. To those who say, I'll just vote for this guy even though he doesn't really represent the Republican Party, or he's a little bit strange, or he says things I don't agree with, and he picks these type of people to work with. We should be seen as saying, hey, listen, look what we're doing. We're speaking truth to the power that we are a part of. We want to be an example to you to say, hey, stand up and say the party isn't mine. I just saw an Arizona governor come out and say, I don't recognize my Republican Party anymore. They don't look like what they used to me. That takes bravery, because all of a sudden you're outside you're not playing the game. You're not towing the line anymore. You're saying things have got to change. You're a voice in the wilderness crying out. But that is the type of things that we should be encouraging others to do. That is the type of thing that we should be setting an example and leading others to do. You want to talk about discipleship and helping people grow. We do it through those type of things. But if we're doing those things, and then when those people look at us, we say, oh, and you're all bad and evil too, it doesn't change a lot of things. That's why I harp on this conversation and difficult conversations and arguing well. And people say, why do you say argue all the time? Can't we just have conversations? Well, the fact is I would love to just have conversations. But we've set it up where we are us versus them. And as long as that concept's there, there's going to be arguments. There's going to be disagreeing. So the first step is doing it well. The first step is listening and hearing the other. We can't remain estranged. I've tried it, and I've failed with certain people. I've failed with my dad. But you know what? I just got an invitation yesterday to be on an evangelical Christian television show. And the reason they want me on is because of my work on helping people disagree well and still loving each other. And they said, we don't want you to come on here to debate you. We don't agree with most of your theology, but we think something that you're saying about us coming together and being able to disagree well is important. And the evangelical church needs to hear it. Would you come on our Christian TV show and talk about that? And I said, of course. The guy my buddy who helps manage me and set things up like that, he's like, well, what if they don't? What if they want to debate with you? I'm like, well, I can handle debating evangelicals. It's a little bit easier than debating my friends. So, but yeah, I mean, that's good news. It's good news that people are listening. Evangelicals are listening, going, okay, this guy, we want to hear his voice. All of a sudden I have a voice there, not because I made fun of these people and polarized these people, it's because I said, we can't keep scapegoating each other. And they want to know, well, let's talk about the scapegoating thing. What are you talking? Like, they're interested in having the conversation. That is saying the work we're doing is making a difference. The work you're doing is making a difference. Because you go, oh, well, Jade, you just sit there talking head. No, you all tell me stories of how you've done this and what you've done. And I try to live those out as well and share those with other people. This is why they're coming, and they're saying you have a community of people who have Republicans and Democrats that shouldn't be together, shouldn't be listening together, doing things, having conversations, and the evangelicals saying, we're interested. At the same time, almost zero of my progressive brothers and sisters are wanting to have this conversation with me. So I'm just saying, this is the work. It's not easy. It's not popular. It's not always fun. But it's making a difference. We're making little dents. So Dr. King says, even if it wasn't for the Nobel Prize, I would yet have to live the meaning of my commitment to the ministry of Jesus Christ. And I say amen to that. To me, the relationship of the ministry to making peace is so obvious that I sometimes marvel at those who ask me why I'm speaking against the war. Could it be that they do not know that the good news was meant for all people? For communists and capitalists? Oh dear, and capitalists, even capitalists? For their children and ours? For black and white? For revolutionary and conservative? Have they forgotten that my ministry is in obedience to the one who loved his enemies so fully that he died for them? This is Martin Luther King, folks. What that I can say to the Viet Cong or to Castro or to Mao as the faithful minister of this one? Can I threaten them with death, or must I not share with them my life? That's what we're called to with our enemies, to share our lives. I mean, I'm tired. This work is tiresome. And I'm not even on the front lines. I hope that opportunities open where I can be a little bit more of a leader to leaders, to encourage them to do that, not out of my own ego, just out of the fact that things have got to change. And I'm grateful that there are some people there now. I would have offered all that was most valid if I simply said that I must be true to my convictions, that I have to share with all men the calling to be a son of the living God. Beyond the calling of race or nation or creed is this vocation of sonship and brother and sisterhood, because I believe that the Father is deeply concerned, especially for his suffering and helpless outcast children. I come tonight to speak for them. Someone asked me, Jake, could you not wait until November to start maybe ramping up on the Palestinian thing? You've kind of been quiet about it anyway. Can you just not wait until November and be a little bit, just hammer down? But I said, well, can we wait till November? But can the Palestinian people, can the Israeli people wait till November? Can their souls wait till November? Can the humanity and the loss of humanity and lives wait until November? That's me. This I believe to be the privilege and the burden of all of us who deem ourselves bound by the alliance and loyalties which are brothers and sisters and deeper than nationalism, and which go beyond nations and self-defined goals and positions. We are called to speak for the weak, for the voiceless, for the victims of our nation, for those it calls enemies. For no document from human hands can make these humans any less our brothers and sisters. Skip down some more. But simply, of the people who have been living under the curse of war for almost 3 continuous decades now, I think of them too, because it is clear to me that there will be no meaningful solution there until some attempt is made to know them and hear their broken cries. Listen well. Like I said, I'm taking a lot out of this talk, but there's a lot that I have to leave out just to make this worth the talk, to make this a lengthy, not too long of a talk. So please check this talk out. A call to beyond Vietnam. I believe there's a whole a call to conscience. I used to have it on CD, so I'm guessing it's on, Apple or things like that, somewhere available to listen. You can listen to him in his own voice. He talks about the leaflets that we often drop, that people drop during wars. He goes, all the while the people read our leaflets and received their regular promise of peace and democracy and land reform, now they languish under our bombs. And these are our bombs, folks. And consider us not their fellow Vietnamese, and consider us not their fellow Vietnamese, the enemy. I have a feeling that Palestinians just don't think that Israel is the enemy, but I think they're going to go in, the Americans are our enemies. They make empty promises. Some of them try to help us, but the majority of them, these bombs are overwhelming the support. They know they must move on or be destroyed by our bombs. Listen to this. So they go primarily women and children and the aged. They watch as we poison their water, as we kill 1 million acres of their crops. They must weep as the bulldozers roar through the areas preparing to destroy their precious trees. They wander into hospitals with at least 20 casualties from the American firepower for one. So far, we may have killed 1 million of them, mostly children. They wander into the towns to see thousands of the children homeless, without clothes, running in packs on the streets like animals. They see children degraded by our soldiers as they beg for food. They see children selling their sisters to the soldiers, soliciting for their mothers. I'm going to jump down a little bit more further. Now there is little left to build on, save bitterness, except for bitterness. We must speak for them and raise the question they cannot raise. They too are our brothers and sisters. Perhaps a more difficult but no less necessary task is to speak for those who have been designated our enemies. Jumping even further. How can they trust us when now we charge them with violence after the murder outreigns of Diem and charge them with violence while we pour every new weapon of death into their land? Surely we must understand their feelings even if we do not condone their actions. I mean, how relevant is that? You know, with what happened in October, and and everybody's kidnapping everyone on both sides, really, if you want to be honest about it. Surely we must understand their feelings even if we do not condone their actions. We charge them with violence while we pour every new weapon of death into their land. Jump a bit further. The Reverend says again, here is the true meaning and value of compassion and nonviolence, when it helps us see the enemy's point of view, to hear his questions. See, this is part of arguing well too, folks. When we say disagreeing well, this is part of it. When it helps us to see the enemy's point of view, to hear his questions, to know his assessment of ourselves. For from his view, we may indeed see the basic weakness of our own condition. And if we are mature, we may learn and grow and profit from this wisdom of the brothers and sisters who are called the opposition. And continue to jump ahead on this. We are adding cynicism to the process of death. For they must know after a short period that none of the things we claim to be fighting for are really involved. Jump a little bit further down. Somehow this madness must cease. Can you hear that? I mean, this is the type of thing that we should be saying. Somehow this madness must cease. We must stop now. I speak as a child of God and a brother to the suffering poor of Vietnam. I speak for those whose lands is being laid waste, whose homes are being destroyed, whose culture is being subverted. I speak for the poor of America who are paying the double price of smashed hopes at home and dealt with the corruption in Vietnam. I speak as a citizen of the world for the world as it stands angst at the path we have taken. I speak as one who loves America to the leaders of our nations. The great initiative in this war is ours. The initiative to stop it must also be ours. It's a great thing on Buddhism. He talks about some Buddhist leaders that I'm skipping that's why I recommend you try to find this speech Beyond Vietnam and give it a full read. I would like to suggest 5 concrete things that our government should do immediately to begin the long and difficult process of extricating ourselves from the nightmarish conflict. Number 1, end all bombing in the north and south of Vietnam. End all bombing. Number 2, declare unilateral a ceasefire and the hopes that this action will create an atmosphere for negotiation. 3, take immediate steps to prevent other battlegrounds. I'm just going to kind of jump over these and just leave out the irrelevant parts to us. 4, we must thereby play a role in the meaningful negotiations of any future for the Vietnam government. 5, set a date that we will remove all of our troops or bombs. It goes on to say down further, then we must make what reparations we can for the damage we have done. That we must make reparations for the damages that we have done. We must provide the medical aid that is so badly needed, making it available in this country if necessary. Meanwhile, we in the church and the synagogues have a continued task while we urge our government to disengage itself from the disgraceful commitment. We must continue to raise our voices and our lives if our nation persists to perceive this way. We must be prepared to match action with words by seeking every creative method possible. This is my creative method, but there's got to be more creative methods possible. Who knew that chanting would have such an impact that it did that yesterday? And then you see the day before, and then the next day, you see the politicians find out, oh, these people are angry. They don't want this anymore. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of people who'd explain to you why Israel is not just important to us as a country for the people, but also for the Middle East and America having control in the Middle East and the conflicts in the Middle East. It's a great base for them to be as well. There's lots of different reasons. Unfortunately, a lot of that time goes down to control, maybe some safety, and also money. I will go further into Dr. King's talk. I'm sorry I'm reading so much, but this is how, I want to take this from, I'm going to try to say his words. I want to take this from the source material. And remind us, this person that we quote all the time and talk about and have given sainthood to, remind us these words that he said that are not always so easily digested. These are the times for real choice and not false ones. We're at the moment when our lives must be placed on the line. If our nation is to survive its own folly, every man of human convictions must decide on the protest that best suits his or her convictions. But we all must protest. If we ignore the sobering reality, we will find ourselves on-gazing clergy and laymen concerned committees for the next generation. They will be concerned about Guatemala and then Peru. They will be concerned about whatever next war comes. Jumping further ahead. And this is interesting because given the times when this was written. It was such activity in mind that the words of the late John F. Kennedy come back to haunt us. 5 years ago, he said, "Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable." Did you hear that? Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution impossible. Like that will be the only choice. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution impossible, increasingly by choice or by accident. This is the role of our nation has taken, the role of those who make peaceful revolution implausible by refusing to give up the privilege and the pleasure that comes from the immense profits of overseas investments. I am convinced that if we are to get on the right side of the world's revolution, we as a nation must undergo a radical revolution of values. Amen. I mean, we really do need a radical revolution of values on both sides. We're both need a revolution of values. That is hopefully why we talk about grace here and peace and learning to be in a community that's, why we saw, let's be in a community that most people would see that we should be divided. Let's make an example. Let's show this, because we've got to have a different way of thinking. It's not working. It's not working. We must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-orientated society to a person-orientated society. When machines and computers' profit motives and property rights are considered more important than people, the giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered. When our stuff becomes more important than each other. On the one hand, we are called to play the Good Samaritan. This part I love, because we talked a little bit about this last week, and I love the connection here, because he takes it even deeper. And I was reading this, and I remember thinking, man, I wish I would have thought of that. That's incredible. And one day I'll preach it and say, oh, Dr. King said it. And then I'll say, I heard it somewhere. And then I said, oh, I was thinking. That's how preachers do it. Trying to be a little lighthearted here, not easy. On the one hand, we are called to play the Good Samaritan on life's roadside. But that will be only initial act. One day, we must come to see the whole Jericho road. That's the road that the Good Samaritan was beat on. We must be transformed. We must see the whole Jericho road. It must be transformed, so that men and women will not be constantly beaten and robbed as they make their journey on life's highway. True compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. It comes to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring. We've got to restructure so there aren't beggars. Not just, oh, look, I give to the homeless shelter, oh, I do these things, but we must not. That's great, makes you feel good. But it comes a point where you have to say, why are people homeless? Why are people this way in the greatest, most richest country in the world? Why are people suffering? A true revolution of values will soon look uneasily on the glaring contrast of poverty and wealth. With righteous indignation, it will look across the sea and see individual capitalists of the West investing huge sums of money in Asia, Africa, and South America, only to take the profits out with no concern for the social betterment of the countries, and say, this is not just. It will look at our alliance with the landed gentry of South America and say, this is not just. The Western arrogance of feeling that it has everything to teach others is nothing to learn from them is not just. I'm going to continue to read because there's so much material here. And I hope you'll read this, listen to this over again. I hope you'll go and read this talk. A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. We may have already arrived at spiritual death, to be honest with you. America is the richest, most powerful nation in the world. Can and will lead the way of a revolution of values. There is nothing except tragic death wish to prevent us from reconsidering our priorities so that the pursuit of peace will take proceeds over the pursuit of war. There is nothing to keep us from molding a recalcitrant status quo with a bruised hand until we have fashioned it into brotherhood. That's why we have hard conversations, disagree. That's why these things, that's the goal. It's always the goal. It's not to scapegoat anybody. It's not to say that these guys are bad. Like I made it clear, I've always been uneasy with the Republican Party, and right now I'm more uneasy than I've ever been with them. But I'm also more uneasy than I've ever been with my own party, the Democratic Party, which is, I don't even know if it's I don't even feel like it's my party anymore. With this powerful commitment, we shall challenge the status quo and unjust mores, and thereby speed the day when every valley shall be exalted, and every mountain and hill shall be made low, and the crooked shall be made straight, and the rough place plain. Move on. But the hope that love is going to have the last word. We are now faced with the fact that, my friends, that tomorrow is today. Listen, we are now faced, it's today. I remember the protests and the things we were doing in the 90s and in the early 2000s and the fear and the things we talked about. It is today in so many ways. We are now faced with the fact, my friends, that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. Now remember, this is written in like 1967, I believe. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late. Procrastination is still the thief of time. And this is why Dr. Singh said why we can't wait. This is why I say, some say, can't we wait until November? And I said, but they can't. They can't wait. Can they wait? We still have a choice today. Nonviolence, coexistence, or violence and co-annihilation. So we have a choice. Listen to that choice, folks. This is serious. I mean, this is why the work of revolution exists. This is why I speak about arguing well. This is why I speak truth to my fellow leftists and liberals and progressives and conservatives. This is why I try so hardly to make my voice heard and ask you to like and subscribe and to share these things. This is why, is because I want to see a world where there's no more of this procrastination left, where we live in a nonviolent coexistence. That's the concept of this work. Not in a violent co-annihilation. But that's where we annihilate each other with violence, we annihilate each other with words, we annihilate each other with deeds. And the conservatives are no more innocent than the liberals, and the liberals are no more guilty than the conservatives. We do it to each other. And this has got to change. We've got to realize we are accepted, but they are also accepted as they are, not as they should be. Paul Tillich, folks. We must move past indecision into action. We must find new ways to speak for peace and justice throughout the developing world, a world that our borders and the world that borders ours on the doors, on our front door. If we do not act, we shall surely be dragged down the long, dark, and shameful corridors of time reserved for those who possess power without compassion. And we see how close we are to that. We see that every day. I can't lie. I don't care who this pisses off. This is the world we live in at this point. Is power without compassion. I want to be a people pleaser. I want to make my critics happy. I want to meet halfway. I want to do that type of thing. I want to make my friends happy who don't always agree with what I say. But the fact is there's a much, much bigger, larger picture at hand. So those who possess power without compassion, might without morality, and strength without sight. Now let us begin. Now let us rededicate ourselves to the long and bitter but beautiful struggle for a new world. This is the calling of the Son of God. And our brothers and sisters wait eagerly for our response. Shall we say the odds are too great? Shall we tell them that the struggle is too hard? You know, when I was faced with the conversation I had around the time I became an affirming ally in 2005, you know, this LGBTQ magazine from North Carolina was asking me these questions. And what do I say? The cost is too great. So I've never said the cost is too great. I just said, all right, we'll do it. And this is the way the revolution will continue to roll and move in the future. And I know it's not everybody. I know it's not for everybody. I know some people say it is too great. And for you, I say peace and grace, and I hope you find what you're looking for. I hope you find a world worth fighting for. You know, I may have to wipe the dust from my feet at that time, but with hope of reunion. Will our message be that the forces of America life militant against their arrival as full men and women, and we send our deepest regrets? Will our message be that the forces of America life militant against their arrival as full men and women, and we stand in our deepest regrets? Or will there be another message, a loving and hope of solidarity with the yearning of commitment to their cause, whatever the cost? The choice is ours. It is our choice. And though they might prefer it otherwise, we must choose in the crucial moment of human history, and we are there, folks. This was 1967. I'm going to leave you with a quote that Dr. King has here. He says, as a noble bard of yesterday, James Russell eloquently stated, once to every man and nation comes a moment to decide. In the strife of truth and falsehood, for the good or evil side, some great causes, God's new Messiah offering each the bloom of light, and the choice goes by forever twist that darkness and light. Though the cause of evil prosper, yet 'tis truth alone is strong. Though her portions be the scoffed, and upon the throne be wrong, yet the scaffold sway the future, and beyond the dim unknown standeth God within the shadows, keeping watch above his own. Dr. King ends with, and if we will only make the right choice, we will be able to transform the pending cosmic elegy into a creative psalms of peace. It will make the right choices. We will be able to transform the jangling discords of our world into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. If we will but make the right choice, we will be able to speed up the day all over America, all over the world, when justice will roll down like waters of righteousness, like a mighty stream. Beyond Vietnam, Reverend Martin Luther King, from the collection of talks, A Call to Conscience. So today, again, I come to you with a message of grace and reconciliation and ask you to choose wisely. And it won't be easy, and it's not easy. I'm exhausted. I'm tired. You know, I apply to all these jobs and all these things and think all I want to do is tell people about grace and love and reconciliation. All I want to do is the work of reconciliation, and I still have to sacrifice my time between other things. But that's all the world I want to do, is do this message and help you folks do this message and be an encourager for those who are struggling to do this message and uplift one another in struggle and in fighting the good fight, waging peace on one another. So I hope we can do this. I hope you're encouraged. I guess the question is, what now? Where do we go from here? I'll leave that with you to ponder. And I will see you all next week. Out of obedience to my work, I must ask for you all support. Revolution doesn't exist without you all. And if you can help us financially, you can make a donation going to revolutionchurch.com. I took a pay cut this week to try to keep things moving forward and going. But we still continue to need your support, even at our lowest bit of budget. But I feel like this work is worth it. And until I win the lottery or find a really great part-time job, I'm going to have to ask for your support to continue this work. And we can't do it without you. So please consider making a tax-deductible donation to revolutionchurch.com so we can continue this and continue the work of grace and love and peace and reconciliation with each other. The time is now, not tomorrow. Tomorrow is here. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week. I love you all very much, and I'm grateful for you all being part of this work and this revolution.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. To make your 100% tax-deductible donation today, please visit revolutionchurch.com/donate. You can also learn more by clicking the donate section on the website.